And that is probably the top question that people go into the Keto Babies Facebook group to ask is, here's my story. I haven't had a period in X number of years. What's happened?
She is down 200 pounds. She's overcome PCOS. She's overcome infertility. She now has 3 beautiful babies. She's got a master's in nutrition. She works at a clinic and helps people with their nutrition to get healthier and overcome things like fertility. So I'd love to hear your story and what you think is the best thing to do for your reproductive health.
So my story, when I was 13, I was diagnosed with PCOS. So that's polycystic ovarian syndrome. At the time, I was basically told, later when you want to have kids, we'll see if that's an option, but you're not really fertile. Now, this was a while ago. I'm not 13 anymore, right? I'm 37. So it was a bit ago, and a lot has changed in this time. And in some places, right? So we know that there's a lot that can be done so that you can improve your fertility and have children, perhaps with medical support, perhaps on your own with lifestyle changes. However, the standard allopathic medication process for this, or the treatment process for this, the therapy, is metformin, which is a glucophage, it's like insulin sensitizing, and birth control, essentially to stop you from producing cysts. And that is the treatment. And typically that's all you will get from an allopathic physician. Not always, there are varying levels of involvement, and by allopathic, I mean like your MDs and OBs, that is the standard protocol. That is exactly the protocol I was put on. And I can tell you it didn't really do anything for me. I really reacted poorly to metformin, if anyone has taken that. Just GI issues up the wazoo was not my favorite thing. So I stopped taking it. I was not great at taking the birth control because at that point it was just for helping with cycle, right? To have a predictable bleed, although it isn't actually creating a menstrual cycle. And I was not great at that. I was 13 through 15, just not taking it. I didn't need it as a birth control at that time. So 16 years pass, and in these 16 years, I gained a lot of weight, and it felt like it was uncontrollable. And there was a lot more to it. I was exhausted. I was working long hours. I was working in finance in my mid-20s, and I ended up getting married, and I wanted to have children. And as we tend to do, we say, well, now I want children. Now what do I do? And in the medical clinic, I will speak with patients and say, if children are in your future, now is the time to start looking at your fertility. This preconception health is my favorite area, my favorite thing to discuss with patients, because we're able to set the stage and prepare you for later. So I did not look at my preconception time, and I ended up starting quite a bit later. So I was working in finance. I was in a high stress job, not feeling great, run down. I was pretty close to 400 pounds at 6 feet tall, exhausted all the time. So, and when we talk about nutrition at this time, I had no plan. There were no rules, no plan, no types of foods, no macros, nothing. What I did know is that I was hungry constantly, like every 2 hours. So if you've been there where you're eating and then you're thinking about what are you going to eat next, and you have to, and it is exhausting to just constantly think about where is your food coming from, when is the next meal, not being able to just say I'll eat lunch later and then go about your day. I was obsessed with eating all the time, and I legitimately felt hungry all the time. So after having a long break of not going to any sort of physician because they had not treated me well, the answer was always, well, eat less, move more, right? That'll help you feel better. Typical. And I was like, well, that's not helpful because I'm hungry all the time. How do I eat less when I am hungry all the time? And to quote Ben Bickman, I do all the time, hunger always wins. And I tell people that hunger always wins. So if whatever you are doing nutritionally is leaving you hungry, it is not going to last long term. Let's just say it right there. It will not last because you will be hungry and it is not going to be sustainable for you at all. So at the age of, 28 or so, went to a naturopathic doctor, my first time going to an ND. And I now work at a functional integrative medicine clinic where we have multiple naturopathic doctors. So I really enjoy that experience. For the first time ever, I had my insulin tested. And this is what changed everything, changed my career path, changed my health. This one lab value was so high. Now we like to see it ideally. You're young and healthy, everything's great, no issues, 5 or below for insulin. Some practitioners say like 5 to 10 could be okay. Let's see where it's trending. Mine came back at 70. That's how high my fasting insulin was. For those in the know, that is very high. It does mean that my pancreas is pretty amazing. It's like unbelievable that I can even put out that much insulin. My blood sugar was normal. And I'm telling you this because this plays into the PCOS. By conventional standards, with my A1C being normal, not even borderline high, and my fasting glucose levels, which is what is typically tested, completely normal. So my glucose levels were normal. You do not have pre-diabetes. You do not have type 2 diabetes. So you're fine. There's nothing wrong with you. You must feel okay. You must just need to eat less. But this naturopathic doctor tested my insulin. We saw how high that was. And she said, for the first time, we might want to look at bringing down the amount of sugar in your diet. Now I work in nutrition, and that seems like the obvious statement, like, hey, maybe a lot of sugar in the diet is not the best thing for any of us. I would agree with that. Extracted sugars especially are just not something that have existed all that long. So that sent me down this kind of Googling path, and I know, and we shouldn't do it. And if you're watching this, you've probably done that too. That's probably how you got to this video, is that you're like, well, I want to know what's there. So I started Googling, and I'm like, low carb, keto. This was 2014, and this was happening. And at the time, there were no specialty products. There were no shakes and pills and different sort of things and groups and everything. There were just a couple of websites. And I came across this for insulin resistance, or what's called hyperinsulinemia, as a diagnosis. And I said, I'm going to give it my all. And I did. And very, very quickly. And we tried a few other things, like medically as well. Like we'd even tried, with this doctor, I should say, we tried HCG, which you end up going on a really low caloric, low carb kind of a diet. The HCG injection does stifle your hunger. That's why you can do that. I do not recommend it. It's like a 500 calorie eat. Don't do that. But I decided, there are medical applications, I should say, apologies. There are true medical applications where this is necessary, but it is not necessary from a weight management perspective. And what I learned from that, and I learned from my Googling and from starting to realize, hey, I'm kind of interested in nutrition and research, was that you can do this on your own. The whole point of HCG was to induce ketosis through this ultra low carb, ultra low caloric diet. But it's very nutrient deficient, so I don't recommend that. Within a couple of months of following a low carb keto diet, multiple things happened for me. One, I started cycling, having a menstrual cycle for the first time in 16 years. 16 years. Okay, I had nothing. I was the person with PCOS that had zero cycle. It wasn't just a regular, it wasn't sometimes long, it wasn't sometimes 30 and then sometimes 48 or sometimes 6 months. Nothing for 16 years. I started cycling 3 months in. 3 months. And so over time, I know that was the long version, but I share this because so many people who come to me think like, is it salvageable? Is my fertility salvageable? It's been so long, it's been so bad. What can I do? And I like to say, if I can have my fertility restored, then you definitely can, right? If everything is there and it's a matter of lifestyle, then you can. So I started cycling, which means, and I was ovulating with those cycles. It was a normal, regular menstrual cycle. I was losing weight very quickly in the beginning, which tends to happen. It was like 30 pounds within the first like 5 months or so. And again, I was starting close, in the 300s. So that's, perspective wise. And over time, everything just kept improving. And I ended up conceiving my twins without fertility support. So we would say spontaneous twins. And I also have a third now. And all of this happened thanks to these changes. And we can get into the sciencey bits if we want to, but that is my story. And I want others to know that it is possible to reverse PCOS. It is possible to overcome that. And I had that diagnosis for 16 years with 0 cycle. 0. Once I had stopped the birth control pills, there was no bleed of any kind. So it's possible.
I love your story. Thank you so much for sharing. That's amazing, right? And good for you for not just like taking that diagnosis and like making it your identity. Like, this is what they said. Like, I'm really happy you were able to overcome that.